Welcome back, listeners. We cannot wait to bring you this week's episode. Usually, we like to start our podcasts with a detailed narrative bringing you into the action, into the history. But today's subject calls for something a bit different because Isabella of Castile was an enigma. She was a paradoxical woman, to some a saint wrapped in robes of piety, to others a monster intent on their cultural annihilation.
Hey y'all, I'm Erica.
And I'm Caroline. And today we're bringing you another episode of the pithy chronicle, History with a Bite.
Better than a soap opera.
Spicier than a ghost pepper.
Sexier, if possible, than Bridgerton.
Our historical retellings are guaranteed to entertain.
We're here to prove that history is just another reality show, except unscripted.
So let's open up the book and jump in. In the time it takes you to drive to work, we promise to fascinate, surprise, and enlighten you.
All you have to do is listen.
Are you hungry yet? Erica, I'm going to show you one of the most famous portraits of Isabella, titled Isabel the Catholic by Juan de Flandes, painted around 1500. We've included this portrait in our show notes, but I'd love if you could describe it for our listeners.
She looks very solemn and austere. Her face is very pale, alabaster, with very little color in her cheeks. Her nose is long, it's thin. It really shows that strength, and her eyes stare straight ahead with sincerity and intensity. And she has thin lines for eyebrows. God given me a little bit of early aughts throwbacks, but that's neither here nor there. Underneath a white veil, you can see that she has straight strawberry blonde hair, which is not really what you associate, I think, with Spaniards at the time.
It isn't, but her daughter, Catherine of Aragon, who is obviously very famous in her own right.
Absolutely.
She also had strawberry blonde hair, and every version of everything that I've seen of her, with the exception of the new Spanish princess, has her as this dark-haired beauty, and that's not the case at all.
Right, exactly, and I do love Spanish princess.
It's good.
It's a good one. Back to Isabella, though. More striking is her jowly double chin. God bless this woman.
It's so rough.
It's definitely something you'd see at a church potluck. And the bags under her eyes portray a world-weary woman, the weight of the Spanish world on her shoulders. Now, she is dressed in some spectacular black velvet, very fashionable, very modest.
Must be modest.
Must be modest. It's not fussy. She means business. It shows her piety. And the only ornament is, of course, a very humble and pious, but enormous bejeweled cross, which probably could have fed the whole kingdom. It does symbolize that her piety is a literal yoke on her neck.
Pious, yes, but ostentatious, too. Publicly, she shunned the ornate and embraced her modest faith. Here, in this commissioned image for the world to see, she is rough, ugly, beleaguered, old, with no pretense of beauty. She presents herself as a tired ruler with no time or patience for frivolous female pleasures. But in private, girl was a magpie, hoarding golden gems and amassing an enormous collection of flamboyant treasures.
So, is the ornate cross a yoke or a treasure?
Maybe our listeners can decide. Born in April 1451, she came into this world second to the Castilian throne after her half-brother Henry IV, a man 26 years her senior. She was quickly followed by a younger brother, moving her down to third in line.
Barely 2, and men are already taking her power. Typical.
And it just continues. Her father died when she was still a toddler, and while he left instructions in his will for her family's care and financial security, her older half-bro ignored them. What a guy.
Typical.
And yes, to my Jane Austen fans, hello there. This definitely rings of Sense and Sensibility, down to the idiot brother whose wife thinks for the both of them. But Isabella, her mother, and little brother Alfonso survived. Don't get me wrong, they suffered. Oftentimes food was scarce, but they always had faith. Her mother made sure the children grew up pious and practical. Things got slightly better for her family once Henry finally got himself an heir. After his daughter Joanna was born, he and the court could breathe easier, and Isabella and Alfonso could come back to court and receive, a proper education along with essentials like food and some new clothing. Isabella was still required to stay in Segovia in hopes she wouldn't put her nose into politics, but fortunately for her, she liked to break the rules. Despite her elder brother's efforts, Isabella kept abreast of the political twists and turns, and she was well served in her efforts. Henry IV is generally accepted as a pretty inept ruler, and soon the nobles became mutinous, as one does. They put all their eggs into the Alfonso basket, claiming that Isabella's younger brother was the true heir, obviously.
Ooh, let the battle commence.
And commence it did. The Second Battle of Olmedo, but the results were a draw.
How depressing. All those lost lives for nothing.
Agreed. Sadly, it's a tale as old as time. In the end, the nobles agreed to keep Henry IV as long as Alfonso was named heir presumptive. And Henry agreed if and only if Alfonso married Henry's daughter, Joanna, Alfonso's own niece.
Well, that's definitely some consanguinity issues there. Get me that papal bull on the line.
Ugh. Ultimately, all this negotiation of incest was for naught. Alfonso died the following year, likely of the plague, though there were rumors spread of poison or perhaps even a slit throat.
I hate to say thank goodness, but for the sake of human genetics, it's likely for the best.
Absolutely. I am very sorry for Alfonso, but this really worked out best for our girl, Isabella. It put her back in the running. And unlike Alfonso, she refused to be the noble's puppet. No rebellion for this little lady. She was savvy enough to know that diplomacy and the threat of violence were enough.
So at just 16, she was already proving her political prowess. And it does make one feel a little bit inept.
Yeah, I don't think many of us will ever compare to Isabella. She was a true political force. She and her noble backers forced Henry to repudiate his own daughter, Joanna. Isabella was now the heir and required Henry to make her a promise. Henry would not marry her off without her consent. Again, what a guy. All right, all this background information leads us to our historical spinoff of the day. The Dating Game, Princess Edition. Erica, would you please be our host?
Yes. Bachelor number 1, Ferdinand, son of John II of Navarre. Wait. Is that like the Ferdinand?
That one.
Oh, God, Caroline, I don't mean to insult you, but it's a pretty crappy game if we're looking at just one bachelor.
Oh, don't worry. He may be the one, but this poor princess is going to kiss a lot of frogs, or at least get engaged to them, before she ties the knot. As you said, Ferdinand was the younger son of John II of Navarre, a close ally of Henry IV. Both sides were originally very keen on the match, so keen they betrothed the two youngsters at just age 6. But things soured when John inherited Sicily and Sardinia from his uncle. And then he got, a bit big for his britches and decided our Isabella wasn't noble enough for his second son. Which brings us to...
Bachelor number 2, Charles of Viana, John of Navarre's older son. Wait, honestly, that sounds like an upgrade to me. The older sons usually inherit.
True. But in this case, he was older and much less liked. Like, a lot less. So much so that this dude tried to go behind his dad's back and arrange the match with Henry. However, John II, dear old dad, wasn't happy, and he reacted, I would say, rather badly. He threw his son in jail, and that's where Charles died.
Yeah, I would definitely say a lot less liked.
Indeed.
Okay. Bachelor number 3, Alfonso V of Portugal.
Remember when I said Henry's wife called the shots? Well, Alfonso V was Henry's brother-in-law, and this was obviously Henry's wife's idea. But somehow, Isabella just wasn't stoked to marry a man 20 years her senior who likely plotted with his sister to take her crown once they were wed. So yeah, he was out.
Wow, okay. So let's bring on Bachelor number 4, Pietro Girona Cuna Pacheco, Master of the Order of Calavat. Who is this guy?
Who indeed? He was a noble and brother to Henry's favorite courtier and, most essentially, wealthy. The whole plan was slightly convoluted, but Pedro would make the rebellious nobles happy and give a big influx of much-needed cash. Isabella said no, but Henry went against their agreement and said yes for her. Again, this brother. Luckily for her, though much less so for Pedro, he died suddenly while on the way to meet her. Oh, well, so sad. Next.
Okay, Bachelor number 5, Alfonso the Fifth again? Can we?
He's back! Dude was persistent. He proposed again. This time, Henry accepted, breaking his promise to Isabella once more.
I mean, did Henry want to marry this dude? Like, come on, Henry. If that's the way you're feeling, man. Like,
actually, there are plenty of scholars that believe Henry would have been much more attracted to the brother-in-law than his own wife, but we'll get there.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, got it.
Anyway, Henry was very excited about this prospect. He had a plan. His plan was Isabella, half-sister, marries Alfonso, brother-in-law. Then Joanna, daughter, would marry John II, nephew, the son of half-sister's husband/brother-in-law, and his first wife. And then John and Joanna would unite the Portuguese and Castilian crown.
Caroline, you're gonna give me wrinkles. Like, my eyebrows are so close together right now. I think it's a unibrow.
You mean incest doesn't turn you on?
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Please go on.
This was incest at its finest. For extremely obvious reasons, Isabella absolutely refused and began to make marriage negotiations behind her brother's back.
Reasonable. What other choice did she have? They're putting up the duds. Like, give me this girl an actual potential suitor, please.
Yeah, it's almost like he didn't care about Isabella and her feelings, just what worked best for him. Shocking.
Yep. Point taken. All right, Bachelor number 6, Charles, Duke of Berry, brother to Francis, Louis the 11th. Hey now, that doesn't sound, okay, half bad. He's royal, he's French, could be worse.
Oh, true. I'm sure he could kiss beautifully. However, this marriage removed Isabella from Castile.
Little half-sisters who are waiting around for you to die to take your throne. So annoying.
Unsurprisingly, Isabella refused, likely because she didn't want to leave Castile. She knew her claim to the throne would be very difficult to defend if she was far away in another country. As did Henry, which was clearly his plan. So maybe he's not as stupid as we thought, or maybe his wife came up with it. Who knows?
I definitely know which way I skew on that. Bachelor number 7, Ferdinand again.
Her Prince Charming. Isabella conducted secret negotiations with John II, who seems to have had a change of heart.
Perhaps he felt guilty about killing his firstborn over the whole marriage thing, but I guess I'm just speculating here.
If it makes you feel better, you can think that. They were formally betrothed, but still had to wait for a special dispensation from the Pope. Isabella and Ferdinand were second cousins, which was within the prohibited degrees of consanguinity, meaning they were too closely related for their marriage to be cool with the Catholic Church.
Though not as bad as the formally foreplanned, brother-in-law, nephew, niece, sister-in-law situation.
Fortunately, the church often allowed close relatives to marry when it benefited, the church. In this case, Isabella's friend, Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, who was later to become Pope Alexander VI and is an absolute must for future podcast because he's so interesting /evil / ooh. But I digress. Anyway, he ensured that they got their bull and off they eloped before Henry could stop them.
Oh my God, an elopement? How scandalous.
Isabella pretended to visit her brother's tomb while Ferdinand snuck into Castile dressed as a servant. After a couple of hours to, get to know each other,
holy crap,
they tied the knot with no pomp and no circumstance.
In their brother's tomb?
I don't think she actually went to the tomb. I think she just said she was going to the tomb.
Oh, Okay.
because that would add a whole new level of crazy.
Yeah, holy cow.
And that was it. She was officially off the market. She'd also officially pissed off her half-brother Henry, and she had officially taken control of her own destiny, refusing to be a pawn in men's political plans.
And they lived happily ever after. End of show.
No, sorry, she's not really that kind of a princess. Honestly, when I started researching her, I will admit one of my very first questions was whether or not Isabella and Ferdinand, the Isabella and Ferdinand, the couple we studied in school with, well, we'll get into all their good and bad deeds. Anyway, whether it was a love match or not, high school Caroline was dying to know.
Are you kidding? 20-something Erica is dying to know.
The short answer is maybe? It was definitely an advantageous match for both, and they definitely both chose each other, which is pretty miraculous for 15th century rulers. But the love story sounded good and was absolutely the propaganda of the day. She needed a man.
Oh, come on now. We're talking about Isabella.
Wait, let me finish. She needed a man to ride out with her armies. I know there are legendary representations of Isabella wearing a full suit of armor, often pregnant at the time, but that's not quite accurate. She was an involved ruler. She was present for many battles. She even liked to wear a full suit of chainmail. Girl had style. But she did not, could not, should not fight. And therefore she, or perhaps I should say Castile, needed a man, a king, to be the physical strength, the might behind the crown. And yes, Erica, I see you pouting over there.
I know, and I have a whole rabbit hole on here, but like, I just have to stand by and listen.
No, I get it. I hear you. But Ferdinand was a capable military leader and an exceptional politician, greatly admired by Machiavelli. He was her age, too, which was a serious treat for any noble bride, because they often were looking at spouses 20 plus years their senior, old and ugly. Ugh. His age also meant that he wasn't yet established. He was less likely to take her crown from her, especially as he had yet to inherit his own. In the end, she and John, Ferdinand's dear old dad, signed a very advantageous marriage contract that gave Castile, and therefore Isabella, most of the power in the relationship. Erica, can you read out a few bullet points from the document? It might make you feel better.
I don't know that it'll make me feel better, but yes, I will. Upon their marriage, Isabella was to receive 100,000 gold florins, 4,000 soldiers and lancers, all for her own use, aka personal army.
I mean, I want a personal army. I don't know what I'd do with them, but I feel it would be fun to have them standing there just to look at them.
Honestly, mine would be the best dressed.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, she also received John's word that Aragon would throw its armies behind her Castilian claim to the throne should she be opposed by her niece, Joanna.
Hint, hint.
In addition, all her father's possessions passed to her, not to them, as in Ferdinand got nothing. Talk about a good prenup here.
Mm-hmm.
Ferdinand was also not allowed to give favors or fill positions within Castile, nor could he move about her country or leave without her permission. Wow, okay, that sounds a little, yeah, that's hostagey, but okay. No treaties could be made without her signature. The only real concession, all state documents would be signed by both the queen and the king. This is a really advantageous for her.
As you can see, she was already wearing the pants in this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The happy couple were married for 35 years and had 5 children together. However, he was never given the inheritance of Castile. Ferdinand ended up surviving Isabella by 12 years. But when she died at age 53, her crown passed right over Ferdinand to their daughter, Juana.
I feel like that says it all.
It might. I don't want to give it all away, but I can say that after her death, he wasn't exactly a mourning widower. Keep listening to the end for his final betrayal. Dun dun dun. And during their marriage, he was never faithful, though that was not uncommon for a king at the time. It was considered part of their branding. Royal, vigorous, powerful, sexual. It was kind of a package deal. But even if it was the norm, she was not cool with it. She was known for her virtuous behavior, and kicking women out of her court if he so much as looked at them.
I mean, without a doubt, I would totally be kicking these hoes out left and right, trying to steal my man. Honey, avert your eyes. Avert your eyes. Okay, enough about the relationship. This woman, this ruler, she deserves to be so much more than just her relationship with this little bit of a womanizing Ferdinand.
I couldn't agree more. After 5 years of marriage, her time to shine finally came. And befittingly, when she got word that Henry, the half-bro, finally kicked the bucket, Ferdinand was off fighting for his father and not by her side. Which left our queen to both fight her own metaphorical battles, because, she had soldiers for the actual swordplay, and to claim her own throne.
Good for her.
But first, she'd have to take on her niece, Joanna. Yes, her presumption was right. Despite the many signed documents, sworn allegiances, and the legal succession, Henry's daughter, Joanna, refused to give up her claim to the throne.
After all, she was the king's only child.
But was she? That's where things get kind of sticky.
Oh, God.
The nobles who supported Isabella's claim, and who had previously rebelled against Henry while he was still alive, weren't so sure. Most believed that Joanna was not, in fact, his daughter, and there was some evidence to support their accusations. First, Henry wasn't well known for his ability to have children. His first marriage was annulled after 13 years. Without producing even a pregnancy, the Pope declared it invalid because witchcraft had prevented Henry from consummating it.
Oh, okay. It's the witches now. I got it.
Oh, yes, he did. Witchcraft. That poor woman was actually sent home and imprisoned by her own family for the rest of her life.
Yep, that sounds about right.
So, when wife number 2, Joanna of Portugal, took 6 years to get pregnant, people were definitely suspicious. Her daughter, also named Joanna, quickly received the nickname La Beltraneja, an insulting slander that insinuated she was the bastard daughter of Beltran de la Cueva, who was presumed to be the queen's lover at the time.
At that point, I think I'd have to take a lover too.
No. Girls gotta have, never mind. Things looked even worse when Joanna, the mom, not the baby, was banished from court. She was sent into exile at Bishop Fonseca's castle. Only the bishop and the queen fell in love.
Well, that is certainly a new chess move.
The two of them went on to have 2 illegitimate sons together, the final nails in her queenly coffin. So when Henry died, Joanna, the baby, was just 12 years old. She was alone. She was thought a bastard by most of the court, and she was not the heir presumptive. She was most certainly down, but not out. Her mother, still a princess of Portugal, remained her champion from afar, and Portugal sensed an opportunity. They backed her claim, hoping to unite the Portuguese and Castilian crown.
I refuse to use the term catfight, but it does feel like we're building to something pretty juicy.
Buckle up. Ugh. Beginning with Henry's death in 1474, these ladies and their backers fought tooth and nail for 2 years to claim this crown. From the get-go, Isabella, our little political princess, smartly crafted her assumption, taking great pains to present herself and her reign in the very best light. She immediately conducted the ceremonious handing over of the treasury keys, which was essential because whoever holds the money pays the military.
And as a military spouse, we strongly support the military getting paid.
In full view of her people, the nobles and grandees kissed her royal hand. The ceremony was brief, austere, and a significant contrast to the luxurious and expensive reign of her brother. Letters were dispatched across the kingdom proclaiming Henry's death and his legal heir's ascension to the throne.
So, while Ferdinand was away, the queen came out to play. I bet he wasn't thrilled to miss that one.
I did not see that coming. He heard about it a week later, and he was pissed, especially because Isabella left out a few key details in her letter recounting the events. For instance, she neglected to mention that people cried out, La reina a señora nuestra, la reina doña Isabel, e por el rey don Fernando, como su legítimo marido. A.k.a. Castile has a new queen, yay! And she's got herself a prince consort, but nothing more. To his slight credit. While he bitched and moaned behind the scenes, in public, they presented a unified front. And they needed to stick together because while Joanna was down, remember, she still was not out.
Was there a plot afoot?
Many. Joanna needed support to stake her claim, and so she turned to her best/only option, Portugal. More specifically, her dear uncle, King Alfonso V.
I know this guy. He's the one who proposed marrying Isabella to his son, could marry Joanna and the whole incestuous knot, right?
Yes, he's back again for the third time. But, sadly, he can't propose to Isabella anymore. She's taken.
Oh, darn.
So he chooses the next best thing, Joanna, his own niece.
Oh my God. Okay, so I am by no means a papal expert, no matter how much I want to believe it, but I do have to think that there's some sort of, definitive rule that says an uncle cannot marry his niece.
Oh, there is. Absolutely. That is far too closely related, not to mention nasty. But remember what I said about papal dispensations? They're only given when it suits the
church.
Bingo. So married they were, uncle and niece. And after the ceremony, dear uncle/hubby Alfonso, aka the hunkle.
Did you come up with that all by yourself, Caroline?
Brought over his army to commence a year-long war, the War of Castilian Succession.
So the House of Trastamara is really giving the Habsburgs a run for their money right now. Anyway, I think we can safely assume Isabella won this thing.
Nope.
Oh, okay, so the Portuguese took the throne.
No, it was a tie.
Oh, wow, so this is the second tie in this episode?
That's right. Another one. They're back at it, wasting lives, ruining crops, destroying kingdoms.
Wow, that's glorious right there.
Agreed. Fortunately for Isabella, Ferdinand, with all his faults, was a pretty smart cookie. He sent news of a massive victory across the kingdom. Joanna's supporters believed these reports and dissolved their party, fleeing to save themselves.
Oh, okay, all right, propaganda.
I honestly can't believe it worked, but without cell phones or news updates via tweet, Ferdinand was able to make the rumor stick. So while Joanna's forces still claimed the tie as a quote-unquote victory for themselves, they lost all their steam and the Portuguese army disbanded and ran back home.
Oh wow, poor Joanna. Dad disinherits her, mom absconds with the bishop, and she's left to marry her own uncle, who then abandons her. What a gem of a guy. God.
Poor Joanna indeed. This will not be the last time we say that. This poor girl. And remember, that's what she is, a girl. Just 12 when this all began, and now at 14, she's married to her schmuck uncle.
Ugh.
Isabella, however, came out feeling pretty good. She legitimized her new rule by naming her firstborn Isabella, because medieval monarchs have no imagination, as heiress to the Castilian crown. But while Portugal heads home, the fighting is not complete. For 3 more years, this war drags on. Portugal dominated at sea, while Castile dominated on land. In the end, a peace treaty was reached, and it wasn't great for Isabella, but it did confirm her throne. Erica, can you read some of the terms of the treaty, please?
Absolutely. First, Portugal gave up the claim to Isabella's throne. Second, Portugal got to keep basically all the in-question territories. Third, Castile paid Portugal as compensation for the war. Oh, that's not looking good. Fourth, Joanna, former princess, now niece, married to the hunkle, and Queen of Portugal, gets to stay in Portugal. Fifth, Isabella must pardon all rebels who supported Joanna and King Alfonso. And finally, sixth, she must give up all claims to the Portuguese crown. So she keeps the crown on her head and pays for it with land, money, and power.
Exactly.
Well, hopefully Joanna finds some peace in Portugal.
Oh, no, sorry. We hadn't gotten there yet. No, Joanna's sad fate wasn't yet complete. After Portugal gave up the fight for the Castilian throne, Uncle Alfonso also gave up Joanna. He had their marriage annulled, which was pretty easy to do considering their whole genetic knot, and forced her to renounce the title Queen of Portugal and the title Queen of Castile. In the end, she was given a choice: enter a convent or marry Isabella and Ferdinand's 1-year-old son, John. But only when he came of age, and only if he wanted to marry her.
Please say she went to the freaking convent.
She did. She retired to a life of prayer. For the rest of her life, she was referred to as Unhappy Joanna, a fitting moniker. She did have one small act of rebellion. Till her dying day, she signed her letters La Reina, or the Queen, though she didn't actually specify of what. But back to our queen. By now, she'd birthed an heir and a spare. And fortunately, the spare was male, so the whole world could go back to men first and women if we must. After years of fighting for her reign, it finally starts. To give Isabella credit, she didn't shy away from the hard work of running a country. Following her half-brother's profligate reign, she was determined to bring order and a balanced budget back to the kingdom. She created a police force and put money back into the treasury.
Okay, so how exactly did she do that?
Oh, well, it wasn't pretty. Henry, good old Henry, clearly adult,
Oh, great.
had sold off most of the royal estates at ridiculously low prices to pay for his own vices. So she decided to buy everything back for the same small sums.
I take it the sale was not optional.
Definitely not. She also just took everything Henry had gifted. If you'd earned an estate or some property through hard work, or perhaps just by being his friend / lover / those were reclaimed by the crown for no compensation.
I mean, maybe being his friend was hard work.
I would think so, yeah. Isabella did have one stipulation, though. She insisted that any gifts to churches, hospitals, or the poor remain intact. She also consolidated the royal mint. Half-bro Henry began his reign with 5 royal mints. Reasonable. When he died, there were 150.
Oh my.
It does not take an econ major to recognize the problem. Money was practically worthless. But Isabella created a royal monopoly, closed all the mints but hers, and adopted a legal standard. With these concise, decisive moves, she created confidence in the crown and resolved the kingdom's financial difficulties. Done and dusted. She placed her trust in dedicated professionals, not the nobility. She placated the nobles with meaningless and powerless titles. And she also made herself and Ferdinand accessible to her people, instituting Fridays with Isa and Ferd. Come on by, you will be heard.
Oh my gosh.
She was a competent, thoughtful, and pragmatic ruler. She wanted order, she wanted prosperity, and of course she wanted faith. But not just any faith.
Oh, I wondered when you were going to get into this mess.
Well, we're here. I bet most of our listeners can name 2 basic things about Isabella of Castile.
1, the expulsion of the Jews, and 2, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492.
Well done. You clearly paid attention in 5th grade history class. But did you know there was a movement in Spain pushed by Franco himself to make her a saint?
No.
And as recently as April of 2020, the Pope personally asked the Pontifical Commission for Latin America to once again look into a sainthood for her.
I don't know about that, man. I don't know about that.
Uh-huh. She and Ferdinand were jointly known as the Catholic monarchs during their reign. Both were pious, though she obviously held some of the vows more closely than he did.
Fair.
Isabella fervently believed that Spain, in order to be unified, must be unilaterally Catholic, which is obviously a big plus in the saintly column for the Catholic Church.
Yeah, okay, but the way she went about it.
Oh, you're referring to that little thing called the Spanish Inquisition, I assume.
Oh, yeah, amen.
Well, you know, the best way to unite a nation is to give them a common enemy.
Oof.
It's been argued that her religious fervor and determination to rid her empire of non-believers was a tactic. She hoped that fighting for Christ would distract her haters, making them forget they were also fighting for a woman. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the beginning and see if we can unpack this mess. And let's let our listeners decide for themselves if she meets all the qualifications for sainthood.
All right, lay it on me.
Well, it really starts with Granada. Granada was the last holdout on the Iberian Peninsula. The rest was controlled by Spain and Portugal. Held by the Muslim Nasrid dynasty since the mid-13th century, it was a city with a unique architecture, And by unique, I do mean absolutely stunning. And it also had a unique culture, one that allowed for the freedom of religion. Muslims, Jews, and Christians commingled in this lucrative trading hub. Isabella wanted it. She was determined to have control of this peninsula, and I'm pretty sure she was excited to get some stunning new castles as well. And she and Ferdinand worked hard to win it. The war lasted 10 years.
Oof.
Isa and Ferd, my new favorite nicknames, hired mercenaries from across Europe. They improved artillery, invested in the newest and best cannon technology. Isa personally noted and encouraged military talent. She didn't let her own ego stand in the way of progress. If someone had a better strategy, she adopted it with gratitude.
All right.
Finally, Ferdinand and Isabella rode through the city of Granada victorious. After signing the Treaty of Granada, they were handed the keys to the city, literally, and reconsecrated the main mosque into a Catholic church. But despite promising in legal documents to allow Muslims and Jews to stay and live in peace, Isa and Ferd would break that oath just 88 days after entering Granada.
More like Isa and Turd.
As they say, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. I don't know if it took everyone by surprise, but I think the expulsion of the Jews was certainly quicker and crueler than many expected. Isa and Ferd decreed that all Jews had just 4 months to pack up their entire lives and go. They were not allowed to take any gold, silver, money, arms, or horses with them. Property, obviously, had to be left behind, and basic supply and demand means the Jews were forced to sell their valuable land and possessions for almost nothing. Historically, it's claimed that 200,000 Jews left Spain, but more recent research shows that of the perhaps 80,000 living on the peninsula at the time, likely no more than 40,000 Jews left.
Wow, so half.
Yep, and the other half converted. Tens of thousands of Jews were baptized en masse over the 4 months. It was awful for those who left, but for those who stayed and converted, it wasn't always much better. The converts were constantly questioned, and the Spanish Inquisition was used to test their faith, often torturously. Relapsed converts and those who aided them were punished severely.
All right, so what about the Muslims in Granada? They were allowed to remain unmolested?
Originally, yes, but after a Muslim uprising and further breakdowns in communication, Muslims were quickly ordered to convert or leave as well.
So on the saintly scale, I'm not exactly loving it. And that whole be kind to your neighbor, love your neighbor as yourself thing feels, pretty shaky right now. And then, of course, there's the situation brewing in the Americas. I think it's pretty well known at this point that Columbus wasn't exactly a stand-up guy.
No, he was not. All right, let's talk Columbus. First and foremost, he was not Castilian or even Spanish. He was Italian. Isabella and Ferdinand agreed to sponsor his journey to the West in search of a direct water route from Europe to Asia. Yeah, that didn't quite work out. I think we all know that he didn't find that route. And I think most of us know the rhyme. On the 3rd of August, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He arrived, or found land, on October 12th and returned the following year, bringing with him natives. And yes, that means people. He brought back people as well as gold.
For that, he received a hero's welcome. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. His discovery of the Americas led to the golden age of exploration and colonization for the Spanish Empire. He basically made all Isabella's budgetary concerns fly out the window. I do want to make sure that we paint both sides of this picture. Isa and Ferd were very excited about his discovery and absolutely understood the wealth and opportunity it brought. However, Isabella did have strong concerns. She insisted on no slavery. The official policy stated that all subjects of the Castilian crown, to include those recently conquered, i.e. taken, by Columbus, could not be enslaved. And she was true to her word. On one of his subsequent journeys to the New World, Columbus captured roughly 1,200 men, and when he brought them back, Isabella ordered their immediate release and their return to the homeland. Adding insult to injury, she publicly arrested this quote-unquote hero,
Oh, wow,
Columbus.
that's badass. I can't imagine that he took that well.
No, he did not. He and his sons, and their sons, and their sons, and their sons, spent nearly 300 years disputing the situation in Castilian court.
300 years?
Yep. They took the crown to court in 1500, claiming Isa and Turd had reneged on their contractual obligations, specifically his guarantee of 10% of the profits in perpetuity. And there are documents and court testimonies about this case up until 1790, 290 years later. But Isabella wouldn't compromise. She wanted conquest and evangelization. She hoped to bring all these newfound souls into the Catholic fold. She granted all non-rebellious colonists, or Native Americans, citizenship and full legal freedom. In fact, she insisted on this policy even into her death. Her last will states, quote, "Do not give rise to or allow the Indians to receive any wrong in their persons or property, but rather that they be treated well and fairly, and if they have received any wrong, remedy it," unquote. To clarify, when she says Indians, she's referring to the indigenous Americans.
Gotta admit, that sounds pretty good on paper, but I'm not sure it makes up for everything else.
I agree. Her last words on the subject do feel sensitive and morally significant. However, more than a few historians believe that Isabella may not have been quite as pious as she's depicted. Even during her lifetime, she was known to be shrewd and politically adept. And looking back, some think Isabella's modern image is the work of propaganda rather than
all
facts.
monarchs try to present themselves in the best light. I don't see how that's unusual.
I don't think there's any denying that modern monarchs try to hide their flaws. But Isabella was a master. From her infancy, she'd fought for this throne. It's been argued that the histories we have today reflect what she wanted us to read. She's been accused of falsifying documents, discrediting her half-brother with tales of fiscal irresponsibility, and of course defaming her niece as weak and illegitimate. It's also been claimed that she veiled herself in a cloak of humble Catholic servant while hiding her inner, more masculine ambition. She was exceedingly careful to act like a woman with a softness of voice and a piety of conduct. She's said to have personally mended her husband's shirts, and she always lived humbly while on the road and in the public eye, preferring to stay in convents. Though her personal castles, let me tell you, stunning. Here is a contemporary description of her from Giuliano de' Medici in his work, The Courtier. Erica, would you please do the honors?
There has not been, in our time, anywhere on the earth, a more shining example of true goodness, of greatness of spirit, of prudence, of piety, of chastity, of courtesy, of liberality, in short, of every virtue than our Queen Isabella. Wow, okay, that's effusive.
Indeed. She controlled her kingdom and created stability, while still remaining a pious, feminine example to her nation and to the world. Very clever. From the outset of her reign, Isabella tried to craft a Spanish Catholic empire. And despite her womanly reputation, she used her head rather than her heart, even when it came to her own children. Though I'm sure she loved them, most medieval monarchs, like herself, saw their children as political entities to be married off and to create advantageous alliances. So let's do a very quick run-through, shall we?
All right, who's first?
Her firstborn was a daughter, Isabella of Aragon, originally announced as heir apparent when Isabella first claimed the throne. She eventually married King Manuel I of Portugal and died during childbirth. Her son survived the birth, but he also died at the age of 2.
Wow, that's depressing. So next came the prize prince.
John, Prince of Asturias, who became heir upon his birth.
Okay, typical.
John married a Habsburg princess, but died shortly after his marriage.
Are they all gonna die young?
No, not all, but it was a dangerous time, especially for women. Joanna of Castile was her second daughter. She married a Habsburg prince and became the heir after her older siblings sadly passed.
And that's Juana la Loca, so Joanna the Mad.
Indeed it is. But, Erica, there's nothing pithy about rabbit holes.
Ugh.
Moving on. Her third daughter was Maria of Aragon. She married her former brother-in-law, husband of the first daughter, Isabella.
Wow, I have so many thoughts on that, and all of them are yucky.
Yeah, The couple did go on to have 10 children in 16 years, so it clearly worked out. But her last pregnancy did kill her. However, in terms of Isabella's political agenda, she was a great success. All those genes spreading across the world.
Yep. Last but not least is likely no stranger.
The Catherine of Aragon. Ironically, she also married a brother-in-law. After her first husband, Arthur, died, she stuck around and married his younger brother, the infamous King Henry VIII. Despite many tragedies, Isabella's strategy did pay off. Her offspring took their genes and populated the nobilities of Europe. Joanna's son would go on to be Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, along with a list of 10 plus other ridiculously cool titles. He was a very important dude. And of course, she couldn't have known it then, but Spain's claim to the New World brought the Spanish and Catholic influence to the far corners of the world and created a lasting legacy far beyond her own imaginings. She lived an extraordinary life, and she must have been absolutely exhausted when she finally retired or stepped down from political duties, because she died just 2 months later. She was, fittingly, entombed in Granada, reflecting how she saw herself: conqueror, unifier of Spain, the Catholic monarch.
So, back to our question. Is she saintly after all of this?
Here is what the church says. Archbishop of Valencia claimed last year that the time for sainthood might be ripe because, quote, our relations with Jews, who are mainly opposed to the canonization, are very good at the moment, unquote.
Yeah, no words. I honestly have no words.
Yeah, it's a bit cringy. The church argues that Isabella's actions must be seen in the political context of her time, and that her expulsion of the Jews was meant to build Spanish unity. Further, they say the Reconquest was based on true faith and a desire to save souls, and not out of hatred or anti-Semitic sentiment.
Yeah, I'm having trouble with all of that, but I guess that's for the Pope to deal with.
I'm having a lot of trouble with it. Yes, absolutely. Isabella is a blurry queen. Some say she's a saint, others see her as a she-devil. Many think she was a brilliant political mind, but others give most of the credit to Ferdinand, though I do think we must take that with a giant grain of misogynistic salt. Was she truly pious, or did she use the trappings of her faith to manipulate her people? I don't have the answers.
Female rulers at this time are always so tricky. Their contemporaries were most often men who viewed them with suspicion and jealousy, and it's extremely difficult to form an opinion or view of them without these very important primary sources. But I think another question to ask is, does the truth matter at this point, or is the propaganda what we're supposed to see, and is that more important than the reality?
Aren't you just Miss Theoretical? For me, especially if we're discussing sainthood, I think it matters what the truth is. Propaganda shouldn't be what we're looking at for sainthood. In terms of her reign and in terms of the Spanish Empire, sure. But that is my opinion only. I hate to leave Isabella here, but I do hope it's given all of us some food for thought and at least a more well-rounded view of this fascinating woman. Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final fact about Ferdinand. A Ferd fact, if you will. After Isabella's death, he was unhappy that the crown went to his own daughter. So behind her back, he wrote to unhappy Joanna, yeah, that one, proposing that they marry and reunite Aragon and Castile.
So after his wife of 35 years died, he tried to propose to her longtime adversary enemy in hopes of stealing his own daughter's throne.
Bingo.
Douche.
Indeed. I think we'll leave it there for this week. We hope that you will join us next week for another sarcastic rendition of history's most exciting tales. Till then, I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica, and we are pithily yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listening to this podcast may induce fits of laughter, unexpected distraction, or uncontrollable rage at the subjects, hopefully not at us.
We hope you learned something today. If not, so sorry. Please be advised we are not experts in the following fields: medical, legal, financial, technological, thermonuclear engineering, submarine warfare, neuroscience, or cat husbandry. Thanks for listening to our little disclaimer. Just covering our history-loving asses. Bye!